Hashtag the tapestry of voices. The auditorium fell silent as she stepped onto the stage, her vibrant dress flowing like liquid sunshine against her dark skin. You've heard her name before, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, but nothing prepares you for the quiet power of her presence. As she begins to speak about growing up in Nigeria, about the British books she read as a child, about the characters with blue eyes who played in the snow and ate apples, you feel a strange discomfort settling in your chest. It's the same discomfort you felt when someone has reduced your entire existence to a single assumption. And just like that, you're hooked. If this story resonates with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more content that challenges perspectives and opens minds. Your support helps us continue bringing these important conversations to light. Zainab closed her laptop, the final words of Adichie's TED Talk still echoing in her mind. The danger of a single story. For years of journalism school hadn't taught her what those 20 minutes just had. She glanced at the half-finished article on her screen, a piece about the refugee crisis that now seemed embarrassingly one-dimensional. The newsroom of the Daily Chronicle hummed around her. Phones rang, keyboards clacked, and her editor, Marcus, barked orders from his glass-walled office. Zainab had been at the paper for 8 months, but still felt like an outsider. As the only Muslim woman on staff, she often found herself torn between her professional ambitions and the subtle pressure to be the voice of her community. "Hey, deadline's in an hour," called Priya from the next desk over. "How's the refugee piece coming?" Zainab hesitated. "I'm reconsidering my approach." Priya raised an eyebrow. "Marcus won't like that. He wants the usual tearjerker. Desperate people, dangerous journey, grateful to be here despite living in squalor." "That's exactly the problem," Zainab said, surprising herself with her firmness. "It's a single story. It's poverty porn. These people had lives before they became refugees. They had careers, dreams, favorite foods, inside jokes with friends." "Save the philosophy for your personal blog," Priya said, not unkindly. "This is journalism. We give people what they expect." But Adichie's words wouldn't leave Zainab alone. She thought about her own family, how her father, now a taxi driver, had once been a respected engineer in Pakistan. How people looked at him with pity or suspicion, never knowing he could recite Rumi from memory or that he'd built bridges that still stood tall in Lahore. Zainab opened a new document and began typing furiously. She would tell a different story. Not just of suffering and escape, but of the physics professor now working as a janitor, of the children teaching their parents English while maintaining their native language, of the community gardens growing vegetables from their homelands. When Marcus called her into his office later that day, his face was unreadable as he held her revised article. "This isn't what I assigned," he said flatly. "No, it's not," Zainab agreed, heart pounding but voice steady. "But it's true. And it's better journalism." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "You know what the readers want." "I know what they're used to," Zainab countered. "But maybe they deserve more than a single story." For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. Then he sighed. "You've got guts, Rahman. I'll give you that." He tapped the paper. "It needs tightening, but run with it. Let's see what happens." That night, Zainab couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Adichie's words about power, how it wasn't just the ability to tell someone else's story, but to make it the definitive one. For years, she'd been trying to fit into the newsroom by telling stories the way her colleagues did. But perhaps her value lay precisely in her different perspective. The article ran the following Sunday. Zainab braced herself for backlash, for accusations of being too political or not objective enough. Instead, her inbox filled with messages from readers, some refugees themselves, others ordinary citizens who'd never thought beyond the stereotypical narrative. "You made them people to me for the first time," one email read. Another said simply, "Thank you for seeing us." Marcus called her into his office again, this time with a rare smile. The piece is getting attention. The editor-in-chief noticed. He slid a folder across his desk. There's a community in Riverdale. Syrian doctors, lawyers, teachers, all working minimum wage jobs now. Nobody's told their story yet. You interested? Zainab felt something unfamiliar, a sense of purpose aligning with opportunity. Yes, she said. I'm interested. Over the next months, Zainab's byline became associated with a new kind of reporting. She didn't shy away from hardship in her stories, but she refused to make it the only narrative. She wrote about the Albanian grandmother who'd started a successful bakery, about the Somali youth soccer team dominating the local league, about the Vietnamese man who taught ballroom dancing on weekends. Not everyone appreciated her approach. Some colleagues accused her of being too soft, too close to her subjects. Online commenters sometimes left vicious remarks about her name, her presumed religion, her supposed agenda. You're making waves, Priya told her over coffee one day. People are talking about your work. Good or bad? Zainab asked. Both, Priya laughed. Which means you're doing something right. The real test came 6 months later, when a terrorist attack in Europe led to renewed anti-immigrant sentiment. The newsroom was chaos, everyone scrambling to cover the fallout. Marcus assigned Zainab to write about the local Muslim community's reaction. They'll talk to you, he said, not meeting her eyes. The implication was clear, her identity made her useful in this moment. She was being asked to extract pain from people like her, to help them perform the ritual of collective apology that always followed such attacks. Zainab sat at her desk, staring at her blank screen. This was the single story at its most dangerous, the reduction of millions of diverse individuals to a monolith that must constantly prove its humanity, its innocence. She began to type, then deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. Finally, she walked to Marcus's office and closed the door behind her. I can't write that story, she said. Marcus looked up, surprised. What do you mean? I mean I won't ask innocent people to apologize for something they had nothing to do with. I won't reinforce the idea that they're all connected somehow, that they're collectively responsible. That's not what I'm asking for. It is, Zainab interrupted. Maybe not intentionally, but it is. And I won't do it. She expected anger, perhaps even a threat to her job. Instead, Marcus was quiet for a long moment. What would you write instead? He finally asked. Zainab had been thinking about this. A piece about how these events affect ordinary Muslims, not just their fear of backlash, but their grief as fellow humans, their complex emotions that never make it into the narrative. And maybe a separate piece about the rise in hate crimes after attacks like this, with voices from law enforcement, community leaders, and targeted individuals. Marcus studied her. You've changed since you started here. I've found my voice, Zainab corrected him. And I've remembered why I wanted to be a journalist in the first place. To her surprise, he nodded. Write it. Both pieces. But they better be good. They were good. They were better than good. The first piece was shared thousands of times online, translated into multiple languages. The second led to a community forum on preventing hate crimes, attended by the mayor and police chief. A year after watching Adichie's TED Talk, Zainab found herself invited to speak at a journalism conference about diversifying narratives in news coverage. As she prepared her speech, she thought about how far she'd come, not just professionally, but personally. She no longer felt torn between her identity and her career. Instead, she understood that her perspective was valuable precisely because it was different, because it could help challenge the danger of the single story that pervaded so much of media. On the day of the conference, Zainab stood at the podium and looked out at the sea of faces, some that looked like hers, many that didn't. A year ago, she began, I watched Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's TED Talk about the danger of a single story. She said that the problem with stereotypes is not that they're untrue, but that they're incomplete. They make one story become the only story. She paused, taking in the attentive faces. As journalists, we have immense power. We decide which stories get told, how they're framed, whose voices are heard. For too long, many of us, myself included, have been complicit in perpetuating single stories about communities we don't fully understand. Zainab shared examples from her own reporting, the lessons she'd learned, the mistakes she'd made. She talked about the responsibility of journalists to seek complexity, to resist easy narratives, to question their own biases. The truth is never simple, she concluded. People are never just one thing. Communities are never monoliths. Our job isn't to simplify reality until it fits into convenient boxes. Our job is to reflect the messy, complicated, beautiful diversity of human experience. To tell not single stories, but tapestries of interconnected ones. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, young journalists, particularly those from marginalized communities, lined up to speak with her. They shared their own struggles, their own moments of compromise, their own desires to tell fuller stories. One young man, barely out of college, gripped her hand tightly. "I've been trying to make myself smaller to fit in at my paper," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Hiding parts of myself, avoiding certain story ideas. But listening to you, I don't want to do that anymore." That evening, alone in her hotel room, Zainab opened her laptop and found Adichie's TED Talk again. She watched it with new eyes, understanding even more deeply now what the author had meant about the power of stories to humanize, to dignify. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "The conference video is already online. You're trending. Proud of you, Rahman." Zainab smiled. She thought about all the stories still waiting to be told, all the voices still waiting to be heard. The work was just beginning, but now she knew exactly why it mattered. As Adichie had said, stories matter. Many stories matter. Stories have been used to dispossess and to malign, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanize. Stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity. Zainab closed her eyes, feeling the weight and the privilege of the responsibility. Tomorrow, she would return to her desk at the Daily Chronicle and continue the work of telling not single stories, but many stories. Of weaving not simplistic narratives, but rich, complex tapestries that reflected the full humanity of every subject. And perhaps, story by story, the world would begin to see itself more clearly, not through the narrow lens of stereotype and assumption, but through the wide, compassionate vision of multiple truths existing side by side, each one valid, each one necessary, each one part of our shared human experience. The danger of a single story wasn't just in what it said, but in what it left out. And Zainab was determined that, as long as she had the privilege